Welcome to part 3, geographers. I just want to say one more thing about slide 24, about the physical geography of Central Asia before we move on. Again, if you scroll in here on this map at the bottom, okay, we see not only the steppe here, but the other sort of climate zones in Central Asia here, which include a desert in particular, and then some mountains here at the bottom. But we see that most of Kazakhstan is dominated by the steppe. So, moving on then. Historically, groups living in the steppe are nomadic. When we talk about nomadic groups, and we mentioned this briefly when we talked about West Asia and the cradle of civilization, nomadic groups do not have a fixed or permanent home. They move for resources or for safety. The traditional dwelling of these nomadic groups in the steppes were called yurts. A yurt is a portable round tent. Okay, it was historically and still is used by the nomadic groups on the steppe. Right, so here's an image here of what a yurt might look like. Under the Soviet Union, so again, we're seeing the influence of this older Russia, I suppose, on this region. Under the Soviet Union, people did begin dry farming wheat on the steppe. So this is really a dry area. There's really no way to get water there, but they were dry farming wheat. Okay. Outside the steppe in Kazakhstan, industry is centered on mining and drilling for natural resources like coal and minerals. Now, Kazakhstan, of course, is only the northern part of Central Asia. We have 4 other countries down here, primarily in the south. Most of Central Asia, including this lower part, is dry. So people are very dependent on the Sur Darya and the Amu Darya systems, rivers down here, for water. The population throughout Central Asia is very uneven. Most of the population lives along the Sur Darya and the Amu Darya river systems. Again, this should sound familiar. We saw this same pattern when we looked at where the population distribution is throughout Africa. We saw that a majority of the population is centered around rivers or other bodies of water. In the south of the region, the economy is centered around agriculture, using irrigation, all right, so diverting water to water their plants from those 2 rivers. One of the crops grown is cotton, which was cultivated or originally grown, once again, under Soviet Union rule. Right? This region was told to cultivate or grow cotton to meet a need of the Soviet Union. So once again, here we're seeing the influence of another country or state outside of the region. The cultural spotlight for Central Asia is Samarkand. It's one of the oldest cities in Central Asia. It was formed in the 4th century BCE. The city was on the Silk Road and was therefore a center for trade. Pictured is the Registan Square, which was surrounded by mosques, again, an Islamic, where Muslim people worship, and madrasas, which is an Islamic educational institution. In 2001, this historic part of the city was also named a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Now, there's something maybe some of you have noticed, and it's really small, so you might not have, but so far we've talked about West Asia and Central Asia, and also North Asia up here, And we haven't talked about these 3 countries, which have nonetheless appeared on all of our maps. So what's the deal with these countries? We call these the Caucasus: Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. Okay. It's very difficult to place these 3 countries in any one of our 6 regions, right? Because it doesn't quite fit with the characteristics that we're using to define our regions. Remember that regions can be fluid. So when we look at maps, some maps might include states or countries or whatever on certain maps, and other maps might not include it in their region. Regions are fluid. So there's really not any, by our standards, that we can include this in. They're almost like their own separate sub-region. The dominant physical characteristic are the Caucasus Mountains, which actually physically separate this area from Russia in the north and the Middle East here in the south. Right here, the Upper Caucasus Mountains and the Lower Caucasus there. The people here speak a variety of speak a variety of different languages and are comprised of a variety of different ethnic groups. This sub-region is actually called the Mountain of Languages, right? The Arab-speaking people refer to it as the Mountain of Languages. These countries, like the countries in Central Asia, were part of the Soviet Union until 1991, and still very much Russia exhibits a lot of control on the region. The main religion of Azerbaijan is Islam, while the main religion of Georgia and Armenia, here's Georgia up here and Armenia here, are Orthodox Christian. Like other regions, the people here have a shared history, and there are disputes over land in between the different ethnic groups. But this is sort of a common theme that we see, and not just in Asia, across the world. So, we've now covered the western part of Asia. We're going to move on to South Asia. Again, moving our circle, focusing here. There are 8 countries in South Asia. This region alone has nearly a quarter of the world's population, making it the most densely populated region on Earth. The 3 most populated countries in South Asia are India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. We see those here, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh here. South Asia has many natural resources, but like we've seen in other places, a large population and ever growing, ever larger, does put a strain on those resources, right? So let's take a look at what some of those abundant resources are. South Asia depends on water resources for agriculture, and we'll say agricultural irrigation. All right, remember diverting the water to water your crops, for farming and for fishing, also for transportation, and even for energy. Some governments in South Asia are looking into using hydroelectric energy, which is using moving water to generate or create electricity. One structure that we see used to create hydroelectric energy is a dam, for example. We also see forests and timber. So different types of timber are found in the rainforests of India and the highland forests of Bhutan and Nepal. Overcutting, so over-harvesting, cutting down too much timber, has caused environmental problems in India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. There's also a variety of minerals including energy sources like coal in India, natural gas in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, and also uranium, which is used for nuclear energy and is found in India. Iron ore is another mineral. It's used to make steel, and a large amount of iron ore is found in the Deccan Plateau in India, and we'll be taking a look at these different physical features on the next slide. Mica is a mineral used in creating electrical equipment, and we find that in India and Nepal. We also, and in correlation, have seen kind of a booming industry in electronics in India, likely because they have access to this resource that you need to build it. We also see gemstones, another type of mineral, so diamonds in India. Sri Lanka has semi-precious stones. They're most known for sapphires and rubies. All right, so let's talk really quickly about the physical geography of South Asia. One of the most recognizable physical characteristics of South Asia are the Himalayas. And of course, we've talked about this. The tallest mountain in the world is in the Himalayan range. It's Mount Everest in Nepal. Pardon me, I might sneeze. Mount Everest owes part of its height to the Tibetan Plateau. Remember when we talked about the world's most extremes, we talked about how arguably Mount Everest is not the tallest mountain in the world because part of its height comes from the Tibetan Plateau. We're not measuring it, the base of the mountain itself. Two major rivers in this region are the Indus and Ganges rivers, which gives name to the Indo-Gangetic Plain. All right, so over here, and this is would be Pakistan, we see the Indus River. Here is the Ganges going through Bangladesh and India. We can take a closer look. This is an interesting satellite image of the Indus River. So what I did is I also copied this map from the previous slide and flipped it around so you know which way we're actually looking at the Indus River here from the north looking south, which is different than how we normally view maps. So I flipped our map there so we would have that perspective. This is a 1994 NASA photograph of the Indus River Valley in Pakistan. The dark area around the Indus River is the floodplain where people grow crops like grains and cotton. People in Pakistan depend on the Indus River for water. To the west, all right, so again, we're looking south. So the west is actually going to be this way, okay, what we might generally consider east. It takes a little reorienting there. To the west is Pakistan. This is the Makran mountain range, and Karachi, which is a major port city on the Arabian Sea. To the east here is India. And in India is a desert. This is a desert here. And this is a salt marsh. Actually, this white area here is a salt marsh, which is what happens when in a coastal region where it floods and then the salt is left behind. All right, so South Asia, climate and vegetation. Take a look at these maps here of climate and vegetation in South Asia. Notice that over here in Pakistan and Afghanistan, we have very much desert and semi-arid climate zones that are very similar to that of the Middle East. However, over on this side of South Asia, we see a lot more tropical and subtropical zones. Let's finish with South Asia with the cultural spotlight. The first is on the Taj Mahal. The Taj Mahal is one of the new 7 wonders of the world. It's located in Agra, India, which was the capital city of the Mughal